Well, this is chapter 4 and also the story of Gail Borden. And this chapter is called A Great Discovery. There is the picture at the beginning of the chapter. Look at that big round thing the guy's pointing at. We'll find out what that's all about. During the 5 years after he returned from London, the meat biscuit took most of Gail's time and energy. Yet he began another venture. He started searching for a practical way to preserve milk. He had condensed milk in his fig orchard at Galveston, but the process was crude, the product poor. He again became interested in condensing milk because of a tragedy on the ship that brought him from England in 1851. 2 cows carried on board to provide milk for children became sick. Babies fed milk from these cows grew ill. Some of them died. The picture of the heartbroken mothers holding their dying infants in their arms stayed with Gail. In New York, Washington, and other cities, he saw the scene repeated. Much of the fresh milk sold was unsafe. People who used it often became sick. Some died. Besides, milk usually soured in a few hours. Gail kept turning the problem over in his mind. In 1852, he went to work. Some details of his experiments are not known, but this is the general picture. He had preserved meat by condensing it. Why wouldn't the same process keep milk from souring? Gail asked himself. He put a gallon in a kettle and boiled off the water until less than a quart was left, from a gallon to a quart. He let it cool and then tasted it. The flavor was terrible, burnt. That complicated things. Obviously, ordinary condensing methods wouldn't do. No one would buy milk that tasted burned. But it did seem to stay sweet a little longer than fresh milk. Was there a way to solve the condensing and flavor problems at the same time? Gail went over the process step by step. He studied every phase of the problem. Condensing alone had not been the answer in the case of meat. Flour was the magic compound. Meat by itself, even when concentrated, soon spoiled. Mixed with flour and made into the meat biscuit, it kept indefinitely. But Gail didn't want to add anything to milk. He wanted milk that could be restored to its original flavor and condition merely by adding water. He wanted milk every mother could use safely. He tried again. Fresh milk itself seemed pure. Then what made it sour? Was something getting into it? Was it happening while the milk was being condensed? Was air the thing that was causing the trouble? There was a way to find out. At New Lebanon, New York, lived a colony of Shakers, a religious sect. Gail had become acquainted with them during a trip through the upper part of the state. He knew they used a vacuum pan when they condensed sugar, fruit juices, and extracts. It kept out the air. It permitted them to evaporate with less heat. It prevented burning and discoloration. Gail wanted the pan for a double purpose, to prevent burning and to see if eliminating air during evaporation would keep milk sweet longer. He went to New Lebanon. The Shakers gladly lent him their equipment. For months he worked, testing, retesting, checking, rechecking. One day in the spring of 1853, he found a formula that seemed to promise success. He evaporated milk in a vacuum pan. No air could get in it. He kept it boiling until only 1/5 of the milk was left. When it was cool, he tasted it. No burn tinge. A rich flavor like a good cream. But would it keep? He waited anxiously. 1 day, 2, and a 3rd day before it began to sour. It looked like success. He had to be sure. He tried it again. The results were the same. Finally, he had no doubt. Milk evaporated in vacuum tasted better, kept longer. Elated, Gail hurried to Washington to file his patent claims. I am aware, he said in his patent application, that sugar and various extracts have been and are now concentrated in vacno under a low degree of heat to prevent discoloration or burning. I do not claim concentrating of milk in a vacuum pan for such purpose alone, my object being to exclude the air from the beginning of the process to the end to prevent incipient decomposition. Yes, decomposition. This is important, and I claim the discovery. The Commissioner of Patents had other ideas. He said Gail must show his process was both new and useful before he could be granted a patent. And the Commissioner felt that the inventor had failed to prove either. He pointed out that an Englishman named Grimwade had been given a patent on a process similar to Gail's, and another inventor had a patent for condensing milk by any known mode. Gail was astounded. He had never heard of Grimwade or the other inventor, or the Patent Office regulations for that matter. All this meant trouble. He had more than enough already. He had been promoting the meat biscuit 3 years and had only succeeded in going deeper into debt. Proving his right to a milk condensing patent would cost money and take time. He had no funds, but the milk condensing process had so much potential value, he couldn't give it up. He had to go ahead. Gail asked a London patent attorney to work on the problem involving the English inventors. It took many, many months, but he proved that Borden's process was new. The other inventor had never carried their developments beyond the idea stage, and no one had ever used the vacuum pan to preserve the purity of milk. The Commissioner finally admitted that Gail's process was different, but he still didn't think it was useful. He said so. Borden claims evaporation in vacno to be the valuable feature of his discovery and necessary, the Commissioner commented. The Commissioner sees no reason to believe this. If it were really a discovery, Borden would be entitled to a patent, but I see nothing from which I can conclude that this exclusion of air is important. If it were shown to me that milk taken fresh from the cow and evaporated in the open air would not answer substantially the same purpose as when evaporated in vacuo, I would certainly grant Borden the patent he asks. But until this is done, I do not feel justified in allowing it. This blunt rejection was staggering. Gail had poured his energy into the meat biscuit. As the years passed, it had failed to succeed. He had, without realizing, transferred his hopes to condensed milk. Nothing, however, would dampen his spirits for long. In September 1855, he wrote a friend, "You ask what I am going to do? First, I'm going to stick to the meat biscuit as long as I can make any sales. Second, I am still making progress in my invention of concentrating milk. I am happy to inform you that I have succeeded in concentrating milk 80% without the use of sugar. It is soluble in either hot or cold water. It is a beautiful article. I do not hesitate to tell you that should I live 2 years, I shall present the world an invention of vast import. Milk will be as common on shipboard as sugar. Remember what I say. I will be recognized as the inventor of this great process." He's got determination. 2 friends, both distinguished scientists, tried to help him prove his right to a patent. One was Robert McFarland, a discovery of dyeing process and editor of the Scientific American. The other was John H. Curry, head of an important laboratory. They offered to test Gail's claims. They checked every known process for condensing milk. They even concluded that use of the vacuum pan to keep out air during evaporation not only was new, but also important. Gail got his patent. Yay! It was issued August 19th, 1856. The 3-year fight with the patent office was over. And then here they show a picture, I guess, of him, one of his buildings there. I don't know what he's pulling up there. Maybe they'll tell us a little bit more as we continue on with the story. In Washington, Gail had met a lawyer named Thomas Green. Green was wealthy. He owned an estate nearby and considerable property in Virginia and Texas. He invited the inventor to stay with him. In return for his hospitality, Gail advised Green concerning the management of property the lawyer owned in Texas. He also made suggestions about the surveying and plotting of land Green held in Virginia. Green and a man named James Bridges prepared the legal papers Gail needed in his patent battle. They were sure the milk condensing process was worth a fortune. They offered to supply money for a factory. That's what it was. It was a factory. In return, they asked 5/8 interest in his patent. Golly, that's more than half of it. Gail had no other way to get money. He accepted their terms. They were like part of the Shark Tank. Gail lost no time getting started. His debts worried him. He wanted to get them paid. He selected Wolcottville, later named Torrington, on the Naugatuck River in Connecticut as the place to build his milk plant. It was in a tiny village in the center of a rich farming area. The farmers would supply all the milk he needed, and the town was close enough to New York City to keep the cost of shipping condensed milk to market low. His arrival in the village of Wolcottville caused great excitement. In a few hours, word spread that a stranger from the West was in town, and he was prepared to start a desirable enterprise, and that he had the blessing of the village's leading citizen, Darius Minor. Gail rented an old carriage factory and began to convert it into a milk plant. The town turned out every day to see how work was progressing. His factory became almost a community enterprise. The people were as anxious as Gail to see the remodeling completed and the milk production started. One day, black news came. Gail Borden's backers, Green and Bridges, decided to risk no more money. Gail was penniless. Bills were due. A friend lent him $100. He went to New York. Without money, he couldn't stay there either. He returned to Galveston, where he had a house. His children were there. At least he could be with them. He was in Texas 8 months. He never gave up hope. Then a letter came from Green. He told Gail he had made a partial settlement with Bridges and now was ready to advance more money for the condensing plant. Goodness. Tomorrow's going to be the very last chapter of the book. We're almost done. It's a fascinating story.